Great to hear and see and be a part of this room today. My name is Mark Lombardi Nelson. That's all you're going to get from me in terms of myself. I will be moderating today, and I have the pleasure of speaking with and to our panelists today, going over a handful of questions around business development, and the passions forward of how do we achieve and be successful and the things that we're working towards. If you have any questions, please save till the end. If we have additional time, we may be able to get to them. In the interim, though, we do have a handful of questions that have already been pre-written for this specific type of event, so we can go through those. I'm going to do some introductions here, so I'm going to be very polite. Silence your phones if you haven't. I know that's probably something you don't do, so let's make sure we do that. And other than that, get ready for a fun evening of insightful and thoughtful dialogue. So without further ado, we're going to do some brief introductions. Fortunately, there's some old friends and new friends at the table tonight. I'll start with Ruben Pressman. He's the founder of Presence. I've known Ruben for about a decade now. Fun fact about Ruben, he actually started a nonprofit called Swings Tampa Bay back in the day, where he would just hang swings around the city and cause positive social change. And today he actually serves as our entrepreneur in residence for the city of St. Petersburg. So let's give him a round of applause. Next is a good friend, Joe Hamilton. Joe Hamilton is a co-founder of the St. Petersburg Group. He's also one of the bigger movers and shakers in the community about telling stories, and he's extremely passionate about making sure that everyone has the impact and ability to contribute in a meaningful way. And I've seen this through his actions, not his words. So we're very grateful to have you here today, and let's give Joe a round of applause. And last is Sue Goodman. And Sue, we just met today, though I tell you, I'm very impressed by the acumen, your passion, your purpose. She's new to St. Petersburg, been here for a couple years now, 2 years? Under 2 years. Fun fact, was actually went to one of the first graduates of a military academy as one of the first female military academy graduates back in her studies. She's now pursuing a doctorate in business administration. And interestingly enough, she's going to take her career in acumen from Wall Street and working in private equity and turn that into a dissertation around nonprofit governance. So we're so very grateful to have you here today. Very excited for your insights. So let's give all of our panelists a round of applause. And then, did I do it right? Everybody got good? Is good enough? Well, here we go. So I'll dive right in with the first question, being, let's say I'm starting a company. I've been bootstrapping, so dollars are tight. I'm running out of cash. I need more money to make the thing work. It's got to grow, it's got to scale, so I'm going to have to take on some type of financing. Walk me through the opportunities, pros and cons of seeking debt, seeking initial seed money, private investment from family and friends, or comparatively to any other groups that exist. What are the options? We'll start with Sue and work down.
Okay. Well, if you're a small business and you're bootstrapping, debt is probably not an option. You're probably not going to be able to be bankable by a bank. Even talking about asset-based lending, you're most likely not at that point yet. I am a former commercial banker, going way back. You're probably not of interest. I will say don't use your credit cards. That is probably one of the worst things. Those interest rates are going to kill you, just absolutely kill you. Just don't use your credit cards. The easiest is friends and family, but you can burn bridges. If you do that, that's a big caveat. If you fail, you can alienate. I have some personal friends going way back that I have some people that don't talk to each other because one financed another and her business went under. I mean, she was an early app creator and it didn't work. She lost about $250,000 of friends and family's money. But friend and family, if you especially can find deep pockets, it really is going to be such an individual approach. It really depends what your business is and who you appeal to. You sometimes have to come across, I hate the word, but the right sugar daddy, someone who gets you, who understands what you are doing. My background on Wall Street is all anything but tech is what I covered. So you really wouldn't come to me for a tech advice, but if you want anything on manufacturing, retail, distribution, those were the industries I covered. I can talk your head off on the private equity side of timber investing if you'd like to talk about that. But tech, you don't want me to be your tech banker because that is the one area I'm not focused on. And I'm sorry, most of the room probably is a tech person, but that's not me. I know I'm not the smartest person in the room when it comes to tech, and I will totally defer to someone like Joe. There you go, Joe.
That's a great segue.
Yeah.
I think I'll just probably throw in a couple quick tidbits. One is don't get to the point where you're running out of money before you seek money. But obviously put you in a weakened position, so look ahead. That's what a good business owner and operator should do. Two, don't put any kind of anti-dilution rights. Maybe one round or whatever. That's a lot of a mistake that I see a lot of early stage raisers make is they put some anti-dilution in at the request of the people putting money in. And then the old adage is that if you ask for money, you get advice, and if you ask for advice, you get money, and that's actually a nice thing because the people that are helping you and understanding you and getting to know you and want to help you in that way are the people you want to get the money from. So go and look for advice well before you need the money, and you're off in the right direction.
Cool. Yeah, I very much agree with Joe. I mean, just to kind of expand on the point of early, is the first second you're thinking about starting a company, you should start talking to the people that make sense to raise money from. Even if you never plan at that point to raise money, starting to develop those relationships, whether it's with friends that you never would have approached from that sense to begin with, or whether it's other family or even just acquaintances that you want to start building that network. Before we raised capital from locals and friends and family, I mean, I was building a network for 5+ years, knowing this is a relative direction that I want to go. And when it was time to start raising money, that became a lot easier than what I've seen others have to go through. With that, I mean, I'm all tech, so we have a good contrast here. Typically, I wouldn't advise raising any type of capital pre-product, at least on this side of the country. The appetite for investing in that and getting the terms you want and all of that is not great. And especially if you're not putting any of your own capital in, which most founders that are jumping into that might not have or be able to do. You're kind of relying on what we call sweat equity. It's the work you're putting into it on your free time outside of your job to do that. So that's kind of your investment in to show that you are kind of meeting the bar and with whoever you're going to ask to put that money in at some point. And getting to a product and ideally even just a little bit of revenue, right? You've sold that first customer or that second customer, you have the validation or the LOI that if you can just get to this, that someone will buy it. And that's going to line you up for better terms, for more interest, and be able to bring in that first $10,000, $15,000, $25,000 to support you to get to that next stage, right? And the way I understood the question is this is early, right? So I kind of look at raising funding or inflection points with the idea that your kind of first raise is to prove that you can do it, right? So you've got that first customer, that second customer, maybe that third. And then maybe your second raise, your next inflection point at least, is to prove you can do it again, right? So can you replicate what you've done successfully, maybe a few times. And then that next raise, your inflection point, is how fast can you replicate it, right? And continue doing that and scaling it. So at all those points, there's different reasons you're raising money, different people you're going for, but when it comes time to talk to them, you have to get them just as on board as you were and why you're so fired up that this is going to be the next big thing or very successful. They got to buy into that. So,
yeah. Phenomenal advice in terms of the tactical approach as well as the application of the personal relationships. Thank you so much. And we'll start actually with Ruben on this next side. So we're gonna run with, you're actually going to be seeking equity investors. How do you protect your ownership in the company if you're seeking that equity investing? What are the things that you're doing?
Sure. I mean, I definitely don't think it would hurt to speak with a lawyer or two about how those things work. They can get very technical. If you really want to get into a lot of the nuances, I highly recommend a book from Brad Feld called Venture Deals, especially on the tech side. They're going to get into very, very deep information and resources and strategy around raising capital for a scalable venture. When it comes to protecting yourself, I've very much always taken on the mentality that I'd much rather have 1% of a company worth $100 million than 100% of a company worth nothing. Dilution's a thing, it happens. It comes down to getting the right people on board and helping you ultimately be successful with whatever capital you're raising versus worrying about every little percent that you might have of that. Now, with that said, you obviously don't want to give everything up and you want to, be fair and careful, but I think as long as you're working with the right people and you're thinking about it responsibly as you start to grow and what's going to be there, you'll end up in the right place.
One way to protect yourself is to be very accurate with your raised size. Ruben mentioned those inflection points, and a lot of people will tend to want to raise for 1 or 2 or 3 of those. And ideally, in an ideal world, you're raising the minimum amount you need to be comfortable and get by to earn your way up to that value, which then means that next tranche you get at that new value that you've earned. So if you go for it all at once, you're going to get all that money at your basic valuation. So, and then convertible debt is a good way to protect yourself as well, because that way most people are comfortable with a higher top end valuation. So instead of really saying, I'm going to give up this much equity right now in a straight equity raise, you can say, let's just do a convertible debt round. So see how we get along. They get a little interest, maybe get a little discount. And at that point, they're okay to go a little higher in valuation, because if you're doing that at that point, they're pretty happy that you're that high anyway. And then that allows them to price in with a discount for that additional risk, but price in when you actually have some more data.
A couple things I would say is be realistic in your valuation. You can really turn people off if you go in. I mean, we all watch Shark Tank, let's be honest. Don't go think your company is worth $2 million and you're pre-revenue, unless you do have the next best thing out there. I mean, be very realistic, but also then know your partner. Just because someone's offering you the amount of money you need and they're asking for less equity doesn't mean they're the right fit for you. I'm very honest, I do not know the tech sector. I would not be a good partner for somebody that needs that. You want a partner that knows you, gets you, will support you. So just know what their background is and what they bring to the table. You're not just getting a partner that brings cash. You're trying to get a partner that will bring you connections. They will help you get to the next stage. Don't just have your eye on the dollar sign. And then my background too is I am a CPA. That's kind of way back when. I always liked companies and entrepreneurs that at least have a clue of what their balance sheets look like or their income statements look like. Know what your expenses are. Be able to put a rudimentary Excel spreadsheet together to have some forecasting. I've worked with a couple of small entrepreneurs I've met here through 1 Million Cups, and they just don't have forecasts. And I'm just like, I have one person I'm willing to invest money with them, but they can't produce a basic Excel spreadsheet. And I just won't go there. And it's an industry that I'm comfortable with. So I do have some connections. So, so that's my advice is, be able to produce some projections. And 2, you want a partner. You don't want just cash in the bank when you're going for equity.
I got one quick thing I forgot. I think the best way to protect yourself is to not raise money at all. And I don't really want to go any further in the raising money conversation before we forgot to bring that up. Most companies never need to raise any money in the first place. They probably shouldn't. I strongly advise against it, even though I have. And even kind of what Joe said is, make sure you got some success and progress before you go to raise cash and you got the right stuff set up for the turns. But you should never be raising money because you need it. You should be raising money because it's going to make you faster or do something better. It's all about growth. And the reality is most companies these days don't need to raise money, and they might anyway. So,
fantastic feedback, thank you. I'm actually going to piggyback, Sue, on your thought about projections and forecasting. That ties really well into the thought around, is it possible to raise seed VC monies without an exit strategy? And then when you're thinking about that, what if you want to stay in your business and you're raising? What does that look like? So can you talk a little bit about that?
You don't need an exit strategy immediately when you're getting money. I mean, everybody always, you want to grow. And all we know is, what do they say? Like the jobs of, in 15 years aren't even around today. So you just want to have a solid business plan for the next few years and execute. You don't need to say, yeah, I'm going to sell out to, whoever. That you don't need that in my estimation. I mean, yeah, most, big private equity wants to be out in 5 to 7 years, but I wouldn't worry about it. What was the next part was?
So it's the exit strategy, and then if I want to stay in the business, what does that look like when I'm raising?
Again, you want a strategic partner. You want someone that's going to work with you and give you, the intangibles, not just the cash. So be willing to maybe give up a couple more percent if you have to raise money for someone who has the right connections to further your business.
Brilliant.
You definitely don't need an exit strategy to raise money. Plenty of people, half the people when they tell you it, you don't really believe it anyway. So, the big thing about the exit strategy is it informs the direction of the business. The stuff I'm building here locally, I've raised for it, but it's all very symbiotic with the other stuff that I'm doing. It's not modular. So, if you're building a platform that you're going to keep bolting new things onto, that's one direction. If you're going to build something that is sort of its own thing that you can sell, then that's the thing too. So I think it informs the path that you're going, what's the best for the business, and then that will inform the type of investor you're bringing.
So again, a little bit of contrast. Most of the type of capital I've raised and the investors I have, I almost always get the question of what's your exit strategy. And even from day one, I had an idea in mind. And even to go a little closer to what they were saying, you don't have to know this company for this much money this way this year, right? It's at least have an idea of why this is going to be valuable. Especially if you're raising VC capital, right? Because the only way they make their money is when they get out of it, right? And there's of course other ways that can happen. You can sell portions of that off. You can sell access to things, licenses, dividends. There's all kinds of ranges of ways money can happen. But a majority of those types of deals are ending with somebody either buying them out later or the company selling at some point. So, with that said, it very much depends on the type of capital you're raising. And the earlier it is, the less of a strategy you need, but it definitely is helpful to have something in mind for that. And as it gets closer or further, you start to come up with a more defined strategy and more defined names within that. For us as a company focused on universities and colleges, there was a range of major players in the space that we could identify that could be potential opportunities. And even our very first investor, every time I see him, he goes, I was just really impressed. Day one, you knew this and you called it. And every few months when he sees an acquisition by one of those companies, he emails it to me. He goes, look, it's happening. So whatever that means. So I think there is value to it, but I guess to play in line with what the other two are saying, I don't think it's deal breaker if you don't. When it comes to the second part,
so you want to stay in the business, yeah?
Yeah, you can stay in it regardless, right? You can still have an exit strategy and get bought out by something and still be the one that runs it. And in a lot of cases, they might want you to stay. Whether you want to after 10 years of getting into it might be a different story. But I know plenty of people, and I've seen plenty of deals where people stay with it even after an exit, or getting the company to be successful enough to buy those investors out directly, right?
Awesome. So let's go back. Let's say, we're done bootstrapping. We actually got the business to a working piece. We've identified that we want to get VC funding. All of you alluded to the factors that you should consider, though how are you going to assess the value at which you should consider them? So if you're thinking about the highest valuation, if you're thinking about the smallest amount of equity you can give up, or the access to cash, or any of the other metrics that you would place value in, what should you be looking for as the business owner who's going through their first raise?
I'd say it's probably not very many of those things, and mostly how strategic they are. Or how are they going to help you besides the capital? Especially today, maybe not for long, there's plenty of avenues to get capital for companies and opportunities for that. But when it comes to, if you're in the luxury of being able to make the choice, the ideal is that you're picking the person that's going to be able to help you be invested in that company in the long run. They have a network they can hook you up with. Maybe they have some customers they can bring you. They have potential leadership and employees that they can help you hire and bring into it. Maybe they've done it before, right? Even if you're at a stage where you're at $1 million or $2 million, they have operational partners or experience or connections that can help you go from 2 to 20 or 0 to $1 million, right? So to me, it's all strategy. It's finding the people that have either done it before or have knowledge in the space. Our top investor is not the one that's put the most money in. It's not the one that got us the best deal. It's the one that sits on the board for a massive multi-billion-dollar publisher in our space. And I work with him 3 times a week. And that's been way more valuable than the capital he's put in the company. So.
It's different for every company. If you say access to cash, to me that's if you're ramping up production and you need to be able to pay for the materials in advance and the orders coming in are twice as big as the ones you did. And that's a different kind. You don't really want to give up equity for that, but kind of saying exactly what Ruben just said, but framing it maybe slightly differently is that the cash and that should be the baseline. You're pretty much going to get that from everyone. So it's how much additional value can you stack on that, which is all the stuff he said.
Yeah, Ruben put it, you want a strategic partner. You don't just want someone showing up with the, cash that you want them to be meaningful. Going back a little bit, kind of go back to the last question. I can't underemphasize or overemphasize the importance of looking at the documentation that you'll sign. I am kind of a documentation geek. I'm not a lawyer, but I spent years just digging through partnership agreements and negotiating them. And you really want to make sure you understand everybody's roles, responsibilities, and if there are any triggers in them. You want to know what your reps and warranties are. You want to make sure they're correct, and you want to know what your rights are, and that's important. You want to know when, if things kind of go to hell in a handbasket, when your partners can kind of step in and push you out, because that's not what you want, but you want to make sure you know what their rights are, and you want to retain your own rights. So it is really important to get a lawyer that knows what they're doing, or a consultant, or someone who really knows the ins and outs of these agreements. Because I always say when I would negotiate an agreement, I like to just, you put it in the drawer, and you're not pulling it out of the drawer unless there's a problem. So you want to just leave it in the drawer and ignore it and not have to pull it out of the drawer. So you really spend the time. No one, except me maybe, likes to look at legal documents, but you really need to invest the time in understanding what you have, because you could be on the street tomorrow if you don't have a good document, if you haven't protected your rights.
I think it's a good point too. I've always gone with the mantra similar to the drawer problem thing, is that contracts and agreements are built for worst case scenarios.
Yeah.
So you might as well plan for the worst case scenario up front and then put it in the drawer.
Yep.
Right? But even that exercise with that person is a really great way to start learning about what they really want, what their intentions are, and all of that. So it kind of gives some insight before you finally ink that deal.
Awesome. So I'm actually let's think about that roles and responsibilities piece for a minute, and put the conversation towards talent and HR. So if you're limited on cash, what are the things that you can do to attract top talent to come play, contribute, and work towards the goal that you're serving?
Clearly, you give them equity. That's what people are going to want. If they're going to have to take a big pay cut. I mean, it depends what that person, the other person on the other side of the table. I mean, there's always two parties coming to a negotiation, and you don't always know what people's base case is, and you don't know how hungry they are. So, you have to kind of understand where they're coming from. If they're currently unemployed, or they're retired like me, they just moved to Florida, they don't really, you don't need the money. You're willing to do things maybe pro bono, or do things for equity in exchange. You don't need the cash in your pocket today. You have to understand what their motivation is and what they bring to the table. So
That is awesome.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anything to add? Same time.
As an entrepreneur leading a company, I think my advice is always, you're always pitching, right? ABC, always do pitching. City P. No, that didn't work out like I thought it would. Weird.
ADP.
Yes, thank you. So, look, whether you're trying to find your first founder, whether you're trying to get that first founding team, that investor, first company, that partnership, that deal, whatever it is, you always got to be pitching people. And what that is inspiring others. You're motivating them to feel and fall in love with what you're doing and find it just as beneficial as you do for them. And it's no different for that team leadership, your first founder, whatever that person is, and getting them to invest their time in exchange for not cash, whether that be equity, whether that be an upside later, whether it be 100% or commission comp structure, whatever that looks like, depending on who they are, is what's going to align that value for them in the investment that they're making. And I think equity is the easy answer, and I think that's what a lot of people do. It's what I've done, and I think it also provides a long-term motivator for someone to continue staying at that and working harder, because their immediate work is a direct result of what that value is going to end up being. But either way, it's all about inspiring that person to work with you, and the other is just a bonus at the end.
Yeah, I'll just say the buzz term in business school is alignment of interests. So that's really what you want to make sure anyone you bring with you, you guys have the same alignment. Because if you aren't aligned, then it's not going to work out.
So let's talk about the pitching side of it. Let's go back to ABP. So if I have this concept, right, and there's a handful of people who, they may be concerned about sharing their idea. And how do I pitch my company, my product to potential investors without the concern of them taking my idea and building it?
Your idea is not worth anything. The execution is what it's all worth, right? Everybody can come with an idea, and I've always very much run on the assumption that any idea I have, no matter how genius and groundbreaking I might think it is, there's at least 1,000 other people somewhere in the world that are that second having or have already had the same idea. It's all about who does it, right? And it's one of the first questions an investor is going to want to know is, why are you the right person to do this? Why are you going to be the most successful doing this? If you're worried about pitching your idea and someone might take that or do something with it, you're just not the person to make it happen. Because you need to be some of that secret sauce or what's proprietary in what's going to make that successful. And your first probably 2, 3, even first 10 investors are going to be investing in you, not the idea, unless they don't know what they're doing.
And I'll even push that a step further and say that if you come at me or seed funders with that as a concern, it's a massive turnoff. I mean, I don't sign NDAs to look at ideas, and if that's the first thing that they say to you, you really doubt their acumen, because it's not an enlightening thing to say in business.
Yeah, I mean, I can probably dig, you're asking me about the spreadsheets. I can probably dig up an old spreadsheet I had from the early 90s. I'm a lot older than I look. That I used to work for MetLife, and every year we brought in 50 MBAs in our investment group, and it was a funnel. I mean, people were gone, and I had this great idea to start. I had a spreadsheet of everybody trying to figure out where they went, and you know what that would be today? That'd be LinkedIn. I mean, it was, but I didn't take it past my stupid little Excel spreadsheet, or maybe even at that point it was VisiCalc. I don't know. I mean, it was, you have to monetize it. I mean, I also have all these scraps. I mean, I have a lot of really unusual interests and all. I'm really into art and crafts and all that stuff, and I have a Girl Scout troop, and I have all these folders of rip outs of Parents Magazine and all Family Circle and whatever. And I was complaining one day to a friend of mine, this is way back, she's like, well, there is this new app called Pinterest. And I'm like, oh, great. So, I mean, there are people that have your idea just because you don't have, don't approach the world that you have a unique idea. Someone just, someone else is going to monetize it maybe before you are. So there are no necessarily totally unique ideas left in this world. But yeah, I mean, I think back to that LinkedIn spreadsheet, but now I've LinkedIn to all my old colleagues. So
It's perfect. It's come to fruition.
Last thought on that one as well. You're going to get a lot more value all day long out of sharing that idea with anybody and getting feedback and advice before you go to implement that than you will keeping it to yourself and hoping you can stay stealthy long enough to launch it and be successful after.
100%. I'm so happy you said that. Thank you. It's literally in my heart. So let's say you've got the seed money. What's your first investment? Is it people? Is it infrastructure? Is it marketing? What are the things that you are going to prioritize once the cash hits the bank?
My first priority is Marty Manning. I went and got her.
So people for you?
People.
Yeah.
Person.
it just depends. I mean, it really depends where you are in your cycle. I mean, I don't think, people is a great answer, but so is infrastructure. I mean, if you can't support what you've got going, then you gotta be in the infrastructure side. It really depends.
I very much agree. It's going to be case by case on what it is. I think most technology companies, if we put a case together, software companies, and what I think Mark's trying to get at is first fundraise and it's early, it's sales, right? Nothing is going to help you grow than revenue. All comes down to revenue. So whatever that is going to align, which is generating leads, whatever that looks like, it's got to be something that's aimed at revenue generation. If you've got something and you've made some money off of it, or you've got a product, freeze it for a moment and make sure it's validated, find product market fit, find what it takes to get customers, how to grow it, and take advantage of the capital runway you have to figure out what it's going to take to grow the company so that you can do that well.
So one of the last questions that we have here until we open it up to the audience is going to be about the investor prioritization and really what investors are looking for. So all of you have unique experience in this. Can you talk about the things that mattered most to the investors or when you were making the investment in that business? Is it, just the growth rate? Or are you looking at the things that tilt the table? Are you looking at, altruism, disruption? Are you looking at the things in terms of entrepreneurial story or acumen? What are the things that make that are really best in terms of prioritizing when you're seeking that investment? What do investors favor?
It's going to be traction and whatever that means, and it's going to be measured by you, right? So even as Joe, mentioned, and the earlier the stage, the more they're betting on the jockey, not the horse, right? They're investing in whether they think you are going to continue to be successful at this over anybody else out there, regardless of how well another company is doing, regardless of the opportunity another company might have into doing it, regardless of anything else. No matter what happens, you're going to be successful. And that must come across, and you must be confident, and you must have facts and values and reasons why that's going to be the case. That to me is the top priority. From there, it's the other stuff behind that. There's nothing, again, better to measure traction than revenue.
Yeah, I'm close to that. For me, it's customer acquisition strategy. That's it. It's the traction you're getting and then your ability to get more of that traction. I think that's the big rarity factor in new businesses today. I think 10, 20 years ago and back throughout history, if you had a big addressable market and a kick-ass idea, you're 90% of the way there. And now I think if you have a big addressable market and a kick-ass idea, you're 10% of the way there, because attention is just insanely fragmented now, and the people who have the ability to get customers at a reasonable cost are the rarest to me.
I think when you go forward, the most important thing is communication. Never have surprises. The last thing your investor wants to have is a surprise. So if you have a problem, you have a hiccup, you lose a customer, something doesn't happen, something blows up, whatever, communicate right away. We used to laugh when I worked at the bank early on in my career, and when companies would come in and they didn't meet their projections, we're like, well, why didn't they do it? Well, they're too stupid to know what was going on, or they lied to us at the beginning. Do I want a liar or do I want an idiot? So just always keep the lines of communications open. This is not, you're not subject to, Sarbanes-Oxley here. This has to be an open communication forum with your investor, because if you wait till when you're supposed to deliver financial statements or whatever to them, and you show a donut, they're not going to be really happy about that.
I haven't heard Sarbanes-Oxley since business school.
Oh, honey, that's my dissertation. How Sarbanes-Oxley applies to nonprofits, but we can go on forever.
So if you walked into this room today at an early stage in your business or considering raising, I hope you were taking notes, because the thoughts that were shared is exactly what you need. It's the insight from pro tips and real experience that can take you to the next level. So let's give a round of applause for our panel. So we have some time left, so if anyone does have maybe one question per person, we'll limit it to, and then if anyone has questions, please feel free to raise that hand, and I'll come to you with this fun microphone. We're going to hear from you for a second, and ultimately you can direct them to the entire panel or specific panelists. So now would be that time. Any hands? Got one. Here we go.
Thank you, Turtle Toes. So I heard Ruben say, I think I heard Ruben say he recommended not trying to raise money for a startup. And then I also heard him say there's always avenues for financing available. So to try to get out of that conundrum, the one word I haven't heard is collateral. So I think if a business person has collateral, they can probably get funding. So would you be involved with anybody who has collateral, can get money, and who wants to license either his intellectual or her intellectual property or business model?
I'm sorry, just to, you might want to keep the mic there. Just to clarify, what's the question again?
So collateral, somebody who has
Right.
collateral, they don't really need money.
Right.
They get money through collateral. But they also decided maybe they want to consider licensing their intellectual property
Sure,
or their business model.
sure.
So is that something you would get involved
As in, you mean me personally, or like as advice, as an opportunity?
with? Either one.
Okay. Yeah, you know, I'm personally open to any kind of opportunity, sure. My current company doesn't really make sense for, since we're only software, and what we have is basically a product that we're licensing to customers. From a potential of looking at funding from that perspective, I think it's a great option. If you don't have to give up a piece of the company and you're able to leverage something there on great terms that makes sense and help you grow at the same time, I mean, sure, that makes total sense.
I'll just say, sometimes your asset-based lending is some of your most expensive lending you're gonna find. So, you know, these days, if you're in tech, you really don't have a lot of hard assets that, unless you have accounts receivable, but again, you need to run the numbers, and they're generally some of their higher cost financing options there. Licensing, unless you've got something really unique, you own Pokemon or something, I'm not sure what you can take to the bank these days from a licensing perspective. And I don't know Florida state law, I will totally admit that. And I'm not sure, having hard assets to go foreclose on and take the assets, it's a pain in the behind. So again, not really where you're gonna go these days from a financing perspective.
Any other questions? So this is for Ruben. I want to talk a little bit about like your rebranding process, because you originally started your company as Check I'm Here, correct? And then you went to the Presence brand. So I wanted to know how much you invested in that initial brand, and then when it changed, how did that change the path of the company?
Sure. Yeah, and if I can sneak a little story in there with all of that. So the company I currently have is Presence. It used to be called Check I'm Here, which I myself and everyone hated. And it really just happened. Before I moved full-time into this company, I actually ran a branding and product agency that actually created and spun out companies for people. And we were paid thousands of dollars to come up with great names for people. And when I landed on my own things, including this, I never took the time, and it's the hardest thing to come up with names for your own stuff. There's just so much emotion behind that that's just hard to get unbiased for. I was pitching in a little competition, and it was like midnight the night before, and we nailed Check I'm Here, and we're like, all right, great, domain name's available, buy it, let's go. And even our entire brand colors were Eckerd College's blue and color palette, because they were the first school that we pitched to, and we wanted the presentation to look familiar to them. And it just worked, and we just kept going. And we never looked back. And it just got to a point where we felt like we had just dug this deep hole, and we're focused on, and at the time what I believe was right was revenue and traction, not the brand and everything else that went behind it. And we got to a point where we felt like we were a well-known enough name where we could very quickly and successfully execute a change, and everyone would notice it. But we weren't too far down where we were going to have a lot of work to do that. So we felt the time was right. It was like almost 3 years ago at this point, I think. Yeah. We took about 6 months to go through the process I would normally go through for another company with everyone at the company, and facilitated it and did the whole thing to switch it over. And it was crazy. I mean, literally within a few weeks, everything started doubling and accelerating that much faster, from customer recognition to household name to we were just like, wow, we should have done this a lot sooner, because it was an easier name, it was recognizable, and even the switch gave us a lot of promotion behind it.
Any other questions?
So I was just thinking about so many new friends that I have here, and things that we've talked about recently. So one of the things, sort of encapsulating maybe a dozen of these conversations, is what the difference is for the three of you in the capital environment here in St. Pete versus Tampa Bay at large, and raising capital outside of the Tampa Bay area. And what do you think some of the differences, are there differences? If there are differences, what are they?
I'll just say I'm kind of a newcomer and kind of into small businesses here. I would say this is a really nice place to live. We chose here, and I just think that when I say nice, I mean just everything about it. You've got people that are really working for, to bring everything up. I think there probably are more avenues to explore here than I saw in New York City. I mean, New York is New York, and I lived in northern New Jersey. Everything was big money. I mean, frankly, the company I worked, the deals I did, the minimum deal size I looked at was 50 million. I looked at a 50 million investment and we would only be 49%. So I was looking at really big deals, or bigger in comparison to what we're talking about probably in this room. So I just think it's a great community here for small businesses. It was not something that my husband and I considered when we moved here. We looked at the weather and walkability, and it's just an aspect that we fell into, or at least I feel like I fell into. He's kind of doing his own thing too, but it's just amazing. I have not come across I didn't think it existed, and it seems very nurturing. If you don't go to one, I'll put the plug in for 1 Million Cups Greg's here. Every Wednesday morning, if you really are trying to connect with people or really find out more, talk to other people besides what we've got going on here, Rising Tides, come to 1 Million Cups at the greenhouse from 9 to 10. You'll probably find people going through some similar struggles. If you're brave enough, come once or twice and then get up and present. Get up and, you bare your soul on what's going good, bad, or not so good, and what you need. And the last question is always, I call it, I tell my friends, it's a benevolent Shark Tank. That's really what it is. And they'll always say, what does we as a 1 Million Cups community do for you? And you can be like, I need customers, I need a programmer, I need money. You can say whatever you want, and you'll make connections. You'll walk away with a handful of business cards. So.
I think that the answer today won't be the same tomorrow. I think we're in a really nice rapid growth cycle. We've got some big wins coming out here, some great acquisitions. Agile Thought being the latest one, a couple unicorns. Some of the big efforts, Embark and these things are starting. The seeds that were planted with these are starting to grow. So I think it's good and getting better.
For sure, on the same page, Joe is. I've been in the Tampa Bay area. I've grown up in the Tampa Bay area. I've been here my whole life, 30 years. I've been in St. Pete specifically for about 11 or 12 of those. And 10 years ago when I started getting involved in this part of the ecosystem, there was nothing. It was known as impossible to raise capital here. Good luck, see you later. And as I was getting involved, and there were other people starting companies and were obviously much further along than I was, they all left. All my friends left. They all raised capital everywhere else. They had great problems they were solving, they had great solutions they had built for them, and there were plenty of people that would give them capital somewhere else if they were to go there. And even talent then was not great. It was very difficult to find a good team, to build a great team, and to continue to scale it. Everything else was great. It's still great to live here. It's fun. It's awesome. And it's changed. It's growing so fast. It continues to accelerate every single year. We see more people starting to enter into being open to funding companies, understanding it more, moving here and wanting to get involved very quickly. We're seeing little micro funds popping up and everyone trying to do that. We're seeing a lot more deal flow for investors to be interested here. And St. Pete at the same time is making a great name for itself. So people are starting to get more open to that. At the same time, most of the money that's been made here is in real estate. One of the furthest things away from scalable ventures or especially software and technology. So, when it comes to finding someone that's strategic, unless you're building a real estate technology platform, there are a ton of those people here. And they're not necessarily experienced when it comes into investing in companies. Again, getting better, of course. At the same time, I've raised almost $5 million in capital here for my company. And almost every single one of those are from local investors here. So it's possible, but it takes a lot of network building, a lot of alignment, a lot of time to be able to do that without having to go somewhere else to do that. And I've also raised capital from San Francisco and New York. And to answer the question on the ease of that, the difference is I've never raised easier capital than when I didn't go to San Francisco. And I got to stay here and have 2 30-minute phone calls and got capital just off of that, and one of the best networked investors that we have. Yeah.
Yeah, and when I talk about the early days of investing here, I've interviewed a lot of people, and I think we have founding forefathers here, really, the people who cleared the land, literally, because, and Ruben's right there in that, LumaStream, SavvyCard, Priatech, not all of them still standing or thriving, but those are the guys who went in, are you real estate? No. Are you a restaurant? No. And their eyes just rolled back in their head, and they just kept persevering, and they changed hearts and mind. And those guys, you can't underestimate, you can't overstate how much they played a role in changing the landscape here to get to clear the path for the people that are here now.
Hi, first of all, I just want to say that you guys are super informative with so much stuff. You gave me both some confirmation and some new information, so thank you for that and being so open about it. And then two, I have to write it down to actually put my words together. So it's a two-part question. Like, one, do you think I can find this question I'm about to ask here? But is there a way, like, how do I raise a large round here without the revenue numbers and giving up a huge part of equity? Because that's kind of where I'm in right now as I'm debating, well, my partner and I, do we go to San Francisco? Do we do this road show? I mean, they know people there, but I know people here, but they don't believe that we can find that money that we need, and then we should go for a bigger round. And then I didn't think we needed that much, and you just said only ask for the minimum, and I'm trying to figure out. I don't know what to do anymore here. So my question is, how do I go about finding it here and kind of proving to my other investors that we can stay here and we don't have to go roadshow to San Fran, basically.
I think the biggest thing, there's a lot of questions there and a lot of different answers that can, that should probably be better off for a coffee meeting or something. I think the biggest thing you have going for you is that these days no one cares where you are. So you could totally go to San Francisco to raise capital and stay here now. In fact, most investors don't even want to invest in you if you were in San Francisco because nobody wants to live there anymore. And even companies are paying, was it Zapier, I read, was paying, they're a completely remote company, but they're paying employees $10,000 if they leave San Francisco because they know they're going to be happier, they have a cheaper cost of living and all of that. The investor that I work with in San Francisco won't invest there. They're specifically looking at differentiating themselves by geography because they know there's great companies that exist in other places. So you're raising capital at one of the best times because people are finally, for some reason, just now opening up the idea that geography doesn't matter. We're investing in software anyway. So I think you can do both, right? You stay here, work with your network, see what you can do, have them go out to San Francisco at the same time, and get two birds with one stone. Don't hit first.
I'll throw a shameless plug in for Pitchlist because we work pretty hard at making it a good value thing. Pitchlist is a sub-brand of the Catalyst, and we have a profile on there of the companies that are on there, and then we do a cool show called Startup Report. We're about 30 episodes in now. Mr. Lombardi Nelson has graced our presence on it. And we have a partnership with Tampa Bay Business and Wealth, and 4 of the companies every month go out to their 15,000 decision makers, subscribers. So from a straight local exposure standpoint, it's a great way to get in front of some eyeballs here locally.
Yeah, all I really say is, you don't know until you ask. If you're just sitting there, if it's just rumbling around in your mind, it's never going to happen. So you need to, put feelers out here, maybe put the feelers out in San Fran, and just see what the best thing is. And again, like I said, it's not who's going to give you the most money, who will be the best partner for you.
Raise the minimum.
So we've got
Raise
one
the minimum.
last question.
Yeah.
Raise the minimum.
Like what I'm asking.
Yes.
Okay.
Don't ask for more than you need.
Okay, yes. That's, I know
So
exactly
it's-
how much.
When you say raise the minimum, it means put it up.
Yeah.
You're actually saying,
Oh, sorry.
That's confusing.
That's right, Mom.
Yeah,
Don't take more money than you need.
okay.
So we've got this last question. Jake had his hand up, so I'm going to hand this over to Jake, and then we're going to have a nice wrap up. So here you go.
Thank you guys so much. So this question right here is a bit open-ended. Answer how you want. Let's say you're not looking for capital. You're a solopreneur. you're making enough money that you're like, okay, I'm subsisting, this is ticking, but you're at a point where you want to invest in people. But it's like this, it's this time, right, where you could bring someone in, but it's obviously going to cut into you and your living, right? So it's you have to. That's a hard choice. Like, what are your thoughts on mitigating this point in business?
So just to clarify, so separate from raising funding, right? So you have your business on your own, you're making some good money out of it, it's kind of what you do to live, and there's an opportunity to bring somebody in and potentially make a lot more, right?
Yeah, right.
Sure.
So bringing someone in, you get double the work power potentially, right? Or if you bring them in halftime, something like this. But making that move towards bringing someone in, investing in that person, which has its own dangers if they're the wrong person or if they're the right person. This whole what's your experience with bringing people in, kind of making that decision? It's open-ended. You can answer it however you want.
So, I would say it's a weird predicament to be in a sense that why do you bring in the extra half person? If you're bringing them in so that they're as sort of an employee or an earner, you say you double the work availability, then theoretically they should provide more revenue than their cost is, which solves a little bit of that money problem. If you're bringing them in to make your life easier, it's really how do they play in the revenue and profitability of the company, which kind of answers that. Because if they're not adding to it, then they're more of a lifestyle answer almost, that are making your life easier, quality of life better. And then I think beyond that, if you think that there's some sort of I won't say the S word, but synergy, then I think you fall back into what Sue said earlier, which is the different ways to structure the comp, which just you end up being partners at that point, right?
I'll just say, what's your motivation? What do you want out of your life? I mean, I walked away from a really high-paying job. I mean, really high-paying, and I walked in after I got my bonus and submitted my resignation. I mean, it's what everybody, it's what people want to do. And I just said, here. They're like, where are you going? Thinking I'm going home. I'm gonna clean out my closets. I'm gonna lose 20 pounds. I'm gonna, and so. You have to look long-term, like how it fits into your long-term goals of where you want to be in 10 or 20 years. I mean, I'll say, Mark didn't say, I have the best midlife crisis story that no one can, please, if you can top it, please do. My boss fell over dead on my 50th birthday. He had a stroke. He was 25 months younger than I was, so he wasn't even at his 48th birthday. He dropped over dead. Or he had a headache, he didn't even make it. He got in his car and pulled over on the side of the expressway in Amsterdam and didn't make it home. That was a life, that's kind of gets you to reorient where you're going with your life. And yeah, it was kind of a game changer for me. So, why? And everybody in this room is going to have a different answer to that question.
I completely agree with Sue, minus the giant salary. It's all about what you want, right? Are you trying to build it to sell it? Are you trying to build it to have passive income? Are you trying to scale it into something? Are you trying to be able to make a bunch of money? It all comes down to that. And it's bringing that person on, going to get you there, and going to be able to provide that value for you. I think the way Joe's measuring is a good way to go. It's relatively two things. You want to make more money, or you want to do work or less work? And that person can do both of those things for you, and there's going to be something you're going to give up for that.
So I want everyone, if you got any value out of tonight, if you liked any of the responses, let's give a big, warm round of applause to our panelists. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, your wisdom, and your feelings and emotions with us.